And welcome back again. Yours truly, Anthony Parker Alexander of Midnight at the Oasis. Congrats to you guys for being here. Yours truly, Anthony Parker Alexander. It's the end of a day, it's a new day upon us. So if you watched the show a couple times, let's say a quick prayer. Dear God, we thank you for getting us through this long day. We know we've had our ups and downs. Hopefully, at the end of the night, we've got ups. And hopefully, when we get up in the morning, we will continue to have ups because we should always start our day blessed. We should always end with blessings and open up with blessings. So thank you, Lord, or whoever you believe in, for being there, taking care of us all. Amen. All right. So you know it's a stream because how many regular shows do blessings on their show? Well, yours truly does. So we thank you for coming on. We're going to keep doing a show every night around this time until we get people to watch. Okay. And when we get people to watch, we're going to continue to do it. So, like anything new, you start off, think of the first TV station, or maybe Fox when it first came on back in the decades ago, I guess. They may start off with small audiences and then they slowly build. And because the people that see them tell other people, hey, you know what? Did you see what happened on that show? And then that's how they build those shows. So we're like a new show. So please support us. If you have any questions or comments, you can email yours truly. It's parkerman2011 at gmail.com. Parkerman2011 at gmail.com. Looking for my pen. You can leave me a voicemail. Telephone number is 216-702-3718, 216-702-3718. If you've watched the show before, you know we try to get the left side. You know we try to do the right side. And at the end of the show, you may not like what we do, but hopefully, you know we've given you the truth. That's what we do. We were fair and balanced before there was fair and balanced. Hope you had a good day. Boy, what kind of a crazy week this was. Let's go back a little bit. Kamala, she picked her vice president candidate. She picked her vice president candidate. And Tim Walz is his name, governor of Minnesota. And he's taken some flack as far as for his background. We've talked about that on a couple of shows. She had a rally that night to introduce him to America. But later that day, the media was all over his house trying to find out about this guy. We know a lot about him now. Do we know more about him than I think Kamala? I think we do. So earlier that day, the media, mainstream, was at the guy's house. He wasn't even there, or maybe he was, but they're there early in the morning, waiting to see him, waiting to see who she was going to pick. So a week ago, think about this, a week ago, Kamala was just meeting with the people to see who she was going to get. And a week later, she's out and about doing rallies every day, maybe 2 a day, trying to push this guy to the American people. Some people like him, some people don't. Some people say he's a Republican in the Democratic clothing. Some people say he is a war hero. Some people say he's not a war hero. We have debates coming up now, presidential debates. It's coming up in September on, I want to say ABC News. I think that's the first one, or maybe Fox. But it's coming up. Some people are saying Kamala doesn't speak to the American people. She doesn't speak to the press. Trump even did an hour, 70 minutes press conference just to show America, look, I can take the questions. Kamala's kind of become like Joe Biden was when he was in the basement around COVID. On my phone, I get a lot of people on my phone. I get a lot from Republicans than Democrats. I've had some polls on my shows. I do long form. I do short form. I do some as short as 5 seconds. I do long shows as far as 3 hours. Very intense. So check it out. Keeping it honest. Yours truly, Anthony Parker Alexander. I know we like our short ones. But boy, can we get a lot from our long ones. I thank everybody for communicating with me on that. And speaking of communicating and supporting, I have a Patreon page, and on that page, it's you type in "Keeping It Honest," Patreon.com, and you'll see a list of 3 categories where you can contribute to help our show grow. And a lot of streaming shows they're doing this, so you're truly decided to do this too. You see a lot of work that we put into the show. Look at my long form shows, you'll really see it. Even the short forms, you'll see it. We put a lot of work. So you go on the Patreon, and there's 3 tiers, and you get on there, and then you will be able to contribute whatever you want. So become part of our family and grow, because as we grow, you grow, and we are growing. We thank you very much for supporting the show. So we're doing this every night, midnight at the Oasis. That's named after, I think, a 1970 something song, where we talk about news of the day, and then we talk about news of tomorrow. And this has been, like I said, a very interesting week. Hope you've had a good week. Tomorrow is rest day for you guys. So take a break, at least one day. We're going to be here tomorrow, I think, talking about the news over the weekend. And speaking of news, we're going to talk about, so we don't know where Biden is. Okay, it's one thing. We don't know where Biden is. He's somewhere, who knows? Because everything that's happening now, Israel, everything that's happening, Kamala talks. Biden's on vacation. He's on the beach, from what I know. Okay? These wars are going on. I have a feeling that if Kamala doesn't win and Donald Trump does, go back to the 1970s. I think it was Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was president, and he had the Iranian hostages. And he had the Americans, and they were hostages. And so they did not release the hostages until the first day that Ronald Reagan got in office. So for those last months of Jimmy Carter's regime, everybody looks at him now. You know, he's a great man and everything. As a president, he was so-so. His last months, I think he was a weak president from what I gathered. He didn't come out of the White House, really. He stayed in there. So this was going to happen to Joe. He's got about 4 or 5 months left. He's kind of hiding. I don't know what to say he's hiding, but he's not really doing anything, even though they say he is. Kamala's talking. She's doing tough talk. But does she know anything about foreign affairs? Can she deal with China? Can she deal with Israel? Can she deal with all these dictators? We know Trump has, and he will, whether you vote for him or not. But can Kamala do this? So there's a lot of Kamala haters. There's a lot of Kamala lovers. Is Kamala black? Is she getting black supporters? You have white guys for Kamala, white ladies for Kamala. You have blacks for Trump. You have all different nationalities for all these 2 people that are running. But then why can't you just have people, okay, for these people that are running for office? But again, one thing I like that Trump said was, vote with your stomach. So the question is, are you more hungry today than you were 4 years ago? Gas prices are high. Gas is high. Lights are high. What else? Food is high. Wages, though, our wages are low. Okay? Insurance prices are high. There's not really any more dollar stores anymore. They're like $1.25 stores. And I did a show about that. I'm going to re-air that portion of it, probably next week, so you can see about some of these dollar stores. Very interesting segment. So I'm going to air it through one of our Midnight at the Oasis shows. So you are you happy right now politically, no matter who's in charge? Again, is your stomach growling more than it was 4 years ago? And medical bills, they're high. I've seen older people who are struggling to get bills paid in medical bills. I've heard about them cutting up their They're pills. So when I hear the incentives of what Kamala's saying she's going to do if she becomes president, well, she's been vice president for almost 3.5 years. Why hasn't some of this stuff been done? One thing Donald Trump did, he always executive ordered anything. He signed anything. I can tell you, for me running for Congress, I ran for Congress a couple years back. And my bottom down philosophy was I ran because I didn't like who was in office. I didn't like the powers that they had. They were misusing their powers and weren't using them good enough. Sometimes being a politician, it just gets to your head. Okay. Some make money, some don't make money, but you think you're the man. Okay. When people say conspiracies, don't believe in conspiracies, I can tell you there are backdoor deals in politics because I've been around. And they come in your face when they see you're doing stuff. And they try to stop you and they try to derail you. So if there's anybody out there that's looking to become a politician or wants to be involved with politics, give me a contact. 216-702-3718, 216-702-3718. You can text me or email me, parkerman2011 at gmail.com, parkerman2011 at gmail.com. I'm not just keeping it simple. I'm not just keeping it real. I'm keeping it honest. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Yeah, we had COVID. And the interesting thing when people say, well, Trump lost a lot of jobs and Biden gained a lot of jobs, let's break it down a little bit. Their unemployment is low, but how many people are working 2 to 3 jobs just to have a decent income? And then with Trump not having, people having jobs, it was also in the middle of COVID where people couldn't work too. Businesses shut down. So think about this. If COVID would have happened in Joe Biden's term, then could we have said something? And I did a report. I said basically unemployment and wages, if you take out the COVID and you include it or whatever, there literally hasn't been any change. COVID was so much of a big deal that when people came back to work, people came back to work. One was because there were so many jobs out there were, but COVID had shut them down. So when COVID was kind of over with, people were finding jobs, but they weren't finding jobs with big wages because COVID had closed a lot of businesses. And for them to open up again, they couldn't really make any money. So people had to come back and work 2 to 3 jobs. So when a candidate says something, do your research, okay, before you believe anything that they say, whether it's Trump, whether it's Kamala, whether it's J.B. Vance, and whether it's Tim, okay? Make sure you do your research. So speaking of research, I'm looking at the paper here, USA Today, as we talk about things. And it says, the sub crew knew that they were doomed. Titanic explorers knew what was happening, lawsuit says. So there's a lawsuit going out. We'll talk about this, not on this show, but I'm just giving you the subtitles of things. But the sub crew knew they were doomed. One of my shows I did, one of my first ones I did something about the crew. Remember the crew that went down in the sub to see the Titanic ruins? How much of a daredevil would you be? I would not do that because I don't like water. I can go on a boat, but I'm not a swimmer. I definitely wouldn't go in a little sub. But they knew they were doomed. Now, you wonder, they probably knew when they were doomed when it wasn't coming back up or whatever. Or was it an instant explosion? We're going to talk about that on another show. But would you, if you get a free trip, would you go out of space? Or would you go underwater? I would go neither because I don't like elevators either. I've gone on them, but I don't like them. But what would you do? Let me know. Drop me a line sometime. Another story, 50 years after Nixon, politics is no kinder. So do you think if you're an older person and we're around with Nixon, and it's interesting because the guys that wrote the Watergate book, which was about Watergate and Nixon, These guys are still around writing books. It's amazing. Some people say politics is even harder now than it was when Nixon was around. And if I ever get an older politician on my show, I'm going to ask him that question. Do you think politics, if you're around and if you were voting back then or just a kid, is as bad now as it was back then? Let me know. I've got another story coming up. It should be airing soon, and it's about food poisoning. And I will probably air that portion on my show too. But there's a food recall, and this one is really, really bad, and it's serious. So if you see one of my clips going up about that, make sure you watch it. Okay, make sure you don't have that type of food in your house because the bacteria could possibly kill you. We'll be airing that segment if you miss it. But bird flu is spreading, and some people in some cities they don't even seem phased. Some people, when there's things that are happening that are bad, hurricanes, tornadoes, volcanoes. How many times have you hear or seen stories where it's coming to the city they're in, and they're like, "Well, I'm not going to move because I've been here over 50 years and I'm okay." I saw a story where somebody was saying that, and that disaster took care of their house. Okay, so they weren't okay. So when people say you should leave where you at, leave where you at. I was watching the Olympics, gold medal. How many people have watched the Olympics? Gold medal basketball with LeBron, Steph Curry. I forgot it was coming on. It was the gold medal event. So whoever won this game would win the gold medal, and it was against France and the United States. And I said, okay, I'm going to watch it. So I watched the whole game, and I saw LeBron. He's got this beard with the gray one and everything. And I saw Steph Curry. And Steph Curry, he didn't have his little piece, though. He didn't have his piece. But he loves doing that. He loved doing that. All those kind of things. And it was a tight game. And in the fourth quarter, Steph Curry made 4 threes, I think. And he's just swooping it. And he was in his zone. Have you ever been in your zone for anything in your life where you felt like, man, they can't stop me? I'm the go person. He was in his zone. This was only his first Olympics ever. And I cannot believe that. He's been around. He's 36, I think. LeBron's 39. Kevin Durant, I think, is 38. So these three guys, the older guys, that led this Olympics. And you look at it, it's probably, I mean, were they greater than the Dream Team from the 1980s with Jordan? To the young people, probably not. But what you saw is the old regime there, knowing that they will probably never play together again unless it's All Star, maybe. And it was amazing to see. And Steph Curry was just shooting it. He was in his zone. So congratulations for the Olympics for basketball. But you think that we have the greatest players ever anyway, because technically it kind of started in America, but it's so universally out there across the world that there are so many great basketball players, foreign ones, who are just as good as the Americans. So let me know if you watched the Olympics. It was really, really good. So looking through the paper here, seeing what they got, some of the hot topics over here. What do you think of Watts, Tim Watts? What do you think of him as the candidate, Kamala's candidate? Like I said, some people think he's a Republican in Democratic clothing. He's been taking a hit because he has said, he had this position in the military. He's been in the military 24 years. But the position that he has, or said he had, they took it away from him. So his squadron, they were supposed to deploy over to another country. And he had enlisted for 2 years. And right before they deployed, he said he was going to leave because he was running for office. So some people in his squad called him a traitor because he was their boss and he left. And they went to a war zone area. And so today they're upset because when he says he was 24 years in the military, he was 24 years in the military. but he wasn't in any war. He was just like statesly. Okay, it makes it sound like when you're in the military, you're in the military. Should you applaud people when they say they're in the military? What if they're in the military and they're a cook? I was working with people with disabilities for years. It's one of my jobs. And a person came up to me and said, I thank you for your service. And I kind of looked at him because first thing you think is the military. But that was really nice. So, military people out there, if you know about Tim Walz, how do you feel about him? If you liked him, then you found out he may have left his squadron early, but he fights for the military. Does that make you want to vote for Kamala or not? He has a debate hopefully coming up with J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance, who has been in the military, they're going to go at it because J.D. Vance is going to bring that up because he always blames the media. One thing about J.D. Vance, he already doesn't like the media because he's like, media, do your job. So a couple of days ago when Kamala and him were almost at the same place, he got out of his limousine and was trying to approach her. And he's like, I'm going to do your job, talking to the media. Well, he always says, stop throwing her softballs. So I'm like, literally, instead of going after people, just do your job. If you're trying to run for office, stop. And I can tell you this because I ran for office. Stop talking about what the person kind of isn't doing, but what you can do. Because as a politician or anybody in life, all you got to do is one more thing extra and you'll stand out. I'm telling you. So, speaking of the race, who's going to win? Well, when I get messages on my phone, I'm always getting something from people who are Republicans who are picking Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. What do the polls say? I don't know if you believe in polls or not, but we're going to check out this story, and it's an interesting one from CNN, and they're talking about the polls, and we're going to talk in between them talking. So let's all listen in together. And you're watching Midnight at the Oasis with Anthony Parker Alexander.
Election day is 92 days away, and the race is tied nationally and in 7 battleground states. That's according to a new CBS YouGov poll. For Democrats, that's a better environment, certainly than they were in before Harris became the presumptive nominee. Blueprint, a Democratic polling and research group, is looking at all this data, trying to figure out what Democrats need to do to win and join.
So it says that they're locked with 90-something days left. And what would have happened if it would have been Biden and Harris? Do you think they still would have been locked? And remember, coming up in about a week or so is going to be the Democratic convention. So she's going to be probably bumped up even more. But you think about this, Donald Trump got shot at. His poll numbers went up, but because of so much news, bam, Harris is here right after he got shot. Joe Biden dropped out. Kamala Harris got in. She got a running mate. And you know what? I forgot about that. And let's go back again. Here we go in order. Donald Trump got shot first. Then he had his convention. Then he had JD before his convention. Then Joe Biden dropped out. Then Kamala was nominated for president. Then Kamala picked Tim. And now they're all doing rallies and talking about each other. She's only been the presidential nominee for less than 3 weeks. Time is moving fast, people. So if you're going to vote, you better vote. But vote with your stomachs. Okay? That's my thing. Vote with your stomachs. So the new CBS poll, Harris, Trump, they're locked in a tight race.
Joining me now is Blueprint's lead pollster, Evan Roth-Smith. Thank you so much for being here. It's nice to see you. Let's start with what is happening right now in the race, which is that Kamala Harris is trying to figure out who to pick as a running mate. Just focusing on the data right now to get elected, is there any pick that you see as a must pick?
So this was a couple days before she picked Tim, but it was still kind of close. So let's listen how this evolved.
for the electoral strategy?
There's no must pick, and picking the vice president is a big part of Kamala Harris defining who she is to the American people, which is really her number one task right now.
And it's funny because a week ago, she hadn't had a VP. So this is talking about what's in Kamala's head, what's in the Democratic's head right before she picked the VP.
And I think it makes a lot of sense to pick someone like Josh Shapiro. Pennsylvania is an incredibly important state. It also makes sense to not rock the boat. She's riding a lot of good energy, tone change in the election that has benefited her, benefited the Democratic Party.
So it's going to be interesting because we get to see the media right before and who they were talking about. So they said Josh Shapiro right here.
There's some internal debate over Josh Shapiro within the party, and maybe she wants to go a different direction. But I don't think the vice presidential pick is going to be decisive or determinative in this election.
Well, what about a state like Arizona, for example?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say she picks Mark Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
You don't think that will help her, or will it help her in Arizona, or is that something that is not a given?
There could be a small, very modest bounce in the state that the vice president is from. But really, it's about what the vice president signals, right? Mark Kelly might signal some strength on immigration, right? He's a border state senator. And Harris has one of the only real enduring vulnerabilities we see for her at this point, in our data at least, is a deficit on immigration and the border to Donald Trump. She's erased many other deficits that Joe Biden had on the economy, on inflation, on prices. So maybe she wants to double down on that, right? With someone like Josh Shapiro or Tim Walz, who can talk to sort of bread and butter economic issues and things like that.
So that part is interesting. So now that she's running it now, is she staying with Joe Biden's policies or is she going totally different? Because they've asked her, you go on her website, go on her website. What do you see about policies? Nothing. So when the media asked her, oh, I'll have that up there Monday. Why haven't you've been like running for over 2 weeks? You have nobody that could say, hey, we ought to get this website together. I mean, you could have called me. I could have done your website in less than 2 weeks and put some policies up there. Shoot, you at home could have probably done that. Even when they asked her about speaking to the American people, doing an interview. Oh, I'll do that by the end of the month. End of the month, that's still another over 2 weeks from now. Why can't you do it now? Donald Trump's been doing it. You're looking like you're hiding. The Democratic people, come on, you're smarter than that. You're your own worst enemy. Republicans, they do things quick, they do things fast, they do things hard. Democrats, they do things soft or they don't do them. Not saying which one I'm for, just letting you know how it is. He did say Tim, though, so let's listen in.
I want to get to the economy in 1 second, but just first, keeping sort of the big picture, I mentioned the CBS YouGov poll that shows Harris and Trump tied in battlegrounds. The battlegrounds we're talking about: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Do you think, because I know she's raising a lot of money, but at some point they're going to have to make decisions based on her strengths and her weaknesses, as all candidates have, is the blue wall strategy, if we put that back up, meaning Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, the best, or is it the Sun Belt strategy? Which one do you think makes most sense for them down the road? Now they're going to play in all of them.
Right. Well, there's plenty of time left in this election. 90 days is not a long time in real life, but in politics,
it is
a long time.
Yeah.
I think they need to shore up the blue wall first. They need to make sure they're on pretty firm footing. I think Kamala Harris knows she has a real shot in the Sun Belt states, that Joe Biden maybe was slipping out of his grasp. Maybe she gets to the point where she can turn there. I think she wants to. I think that's why she was looking at people like Roy Cooper or Andy Beshear initially as part of her vice presidential pick to grow her appeal in a place like Georgia. But I think first they have to make sure they feel good about Pennsylvania, they feel good about Wisconsin, they feel good about Michigan, and then maybe you try and really go for it.
So that's going to be interesting because her VP, Tim, does he appeal to all those states that he just mentioned, this guy, or what of Josh Shapiro? And even as you listen, nobody want to say they may not have wanted him because he was Jewish. People talking about conspiracies, they don't believe in him. But I'm telling you, a conspiracy is not a conspiracy.
In some of these other places. But if we lose Pennsylvania, there are not too many other ways.
It's Pennsylvania or bust.
More or less at this point in the race.
Yeah, yeah.
So Pennsylvania must be a very popular state. So either Trump's got to win that. Can Trump win Pennsylvania with Vance? Or can Kamala win Pennsylvania with Tim? Look at these 4 candidates, really 2 presidential candidates. And if you can win Pennsylvania, you win it all. If you can't, you lose it all.
Yeah, because of the way that the electoral map is. So let's talk a little bit more about the economy because of, nothing happens in a vacuum. She is the vice president of the United States. Even though there were bonkers, great numbers for months and months and months on jobs, even then, you can tell me people were saying, we don't feel it. We don't feel good about the economy because of inflation. Now, today, you have Wall Street having trouble, and that's, very much in people's faces. Your July poll found only 23% of voters associated Harris with inflation. What do you believe she needs to do?
So it says here, just 23% of voters associate Harris with inflation, whereas a significantly higher share associate her with electronically advantaged issues for Democrats, such as abortion and birth control, 52%, and healthcare, 31%. So people think of her with abortion issues and birth control, 52%, and healthcare, 31%. But with inflation, they only think of her as 23%. And I think abortion and birth control with Harris is probably 100%. Healthcare, I don't really hear too much about from her. And inflation, it's got to be more than 23% because she's been with Biden in the past 3.5 years.
To continue to disassociate herself with the things that voters don't like about the Biden economic policy and associate herself with those that they do.
Well, a lot of voters are still kind of discovering Kamala Harris in terms of her economic policy. What kind of Democrat is she? Is she a Bernie Sanders style progressive? Is she a, corporate Wall Street Democrat? A lot of voters aren't quite sure which archetype she fits because she hasn't been front and center on economic policy for the.
And I think she can appeal to both because some people are saying she's worse than Bernie Sanders
administration. So what we see in our polling as one of the best ways forward for her is to come out swinging as sort of a working people's champion, which is aligned with who she's been in the past, and particularly to lean into some of the prosecutions and suits she conducted while she was California Attorney General. So she doesn't have to talk as much about her time in the Biden administration and say.
So he's saying she should talk about more of the time when she was a prosecutor. And if you think about it, she just says, I have prosecuted. I've prosecuted crooks and felons. Donald Trump, I know the kind. And she kind of, made fun of Donald Trump. But that's all you hear. Give a case that you've done stuff. Let people know what you've done. Because we only know you literally as a VP. And that's it.
I went after the fat cats. I went after, the folks who ripped people off during the housing crisis. I went after the insurance companies, right? A people's prosecutor.
Right. Well, we have, as you said, 90 days is a very long time in politics. Please come back. Great to talk to you. Learned a lot.
The other, of course, thing that we're following this morning is this new.
So she wound up picking her vice president candidate. And the reason I go back, I like looking back at hindsight and see what was in people's minds, the media's minds, before stuff happened. So we've been into the VP, Tim, for about a week or so. But let's go back and see if he was really one of the front runners.
A poll from CBS News that really does show a reset of the race. They're now within, one point of each other, according to this poll, compared to Biden was 5 points behind Trump. He at no point, Biden had at no point led in these national polls. Now,
so this before she picked her VP, 50% Harris, Trump 49%, likely voters. And this is in the 6 key battleground states that you saw. So that wasn't bad. She's 1 point ahead of Trump. I'm curious what she is now.
Again, this is a national poll. It's not a swing state poll. They're, of course, applying a likely voter screen. We're at that phase.
So this is a national poll, not a 6-state poll. That's pretty good, though.
In the race that the Trump campaign is kind of complaining about. But this really does underscore kind of the different environment that we're in now compared to where we were 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's an incredible reset. But you're right, it's a national poll. But I would say when I talk to lawmakers, they say that all those swing districts throughout the country that will determine whether or not Republicans keep the House or flip the Senate they're all also having a reset. This is it's a really interesting time. And Republicans who felt really bullish about 3 weeks ago on taking the Senate and keeping the House don't feel that way at all when I spoke to them as early as last night.
Yeah, sure.
So do the Republicans feel better or worse since she's picked her vice presidential candidate? It's interesting to tell. All of them are doing rallies the same days, same places, sometimes same time. You give Trump credit because he's older. He's doing 2-3 a day too. And you give Kamala some credit too. But one thing that she does do, which isn't good, people are noticing, she repeats the same thing at every rally that she's in. Okay, every rally she's in. If you watched one, then you've seen them all. You can watch Trump, and some of his stuff is the same too, but he kind of he ad-libs a lot more. And it is entertaining. But do you get a lot out of it? You hope you do, but if you see a Trump rally, you got to read up for yourself to make sure that he's not lying.
Nick?
This was the big mo we talked about 3 weeks ago. Like, does this translate into numbers? Now we're seeing it translate in numbers. The lead story of Axios AM hitting inbox probably in the next 35 minutes will be at the expanding map. Democrats being much more excited about Georgia, about North Carolina, which has voted twice, I think, for Democrats. And so I think those polling numbers, that reset has happened. This is a different race now. And I think the next big inflection point in the next 24 hours is who that VP pick is.
Yeah, I mean, look, this conversation is totally different than the one we were having when Biden, after that debate, Republicans suddenly wanted to talk about Minnesota and New Mexico and all these places on the map for Trump. Now we got the reverse going on. Nick, thank you very much. Kadia Goba, thank you to you as well.
I want to look at this poll, Bakari, because this is interesting. A new CBS poll asked Democratic voters who Harris should pick as vice president.
So now this is interesting. They asked people, this is before Tim was picked, who Harris should pick. This is going out to the people and what they wanted. Let's hear what she says.
44% said a liberal. 41%, look at this, said that the person needs to be from a battleground state. And then they looked at man, woman, and you can see those numbers there.
So I kind of knew it wasn't going to be a woman because you can't have 2 women on the ticket. I'm sorry, you can't. Society wouldn't accept that. I don't mind. You can't have a black woman on the ticket, 2 black women. Even when Cornel West, his running mate is an African-American lady. That's not going to win. Okay. The country won't accept that. As far as a man, 38% couldn't have a black man. Has to be a white man, either older or younger. I thought it'd be an older man. From battleground state, 41%, but they say usually when the VP is picked, it's usually not going to make that much of an impact from the state that they're from. And then liberal, 44%. So is Tim Walz a liberal? What do you think?
When you look at this, what does it tell you about Democratic voters? Obviously, she's going to have to pull some independents as well, and potentially some Republicans as well.
Well, all 3 of the finalists fit all of those things. I mean, look, you don't win in Arizona if you're not able to pull some white voters, if you're not able to pull some independents, some moderates, and some Republicans. The same thing in Minnesota, the same thing in Pennsylvania. A lot of people think Pennsylvania is just Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, but there's a wide swath in between those 2 cities, which you have to go out and win votes. So all 3 of those fit that. There are 2 actual trains of thought here about the way you choose vice presidents, and you've seen this throughout history. Either you double down on who you are, principally you double down on your politics. You look at J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, or even you go back to something that's actually more successful and more memorable, and you think about Al Gore and Bill Clinton. Or you try to balance your ticket. And when you say balance, you want people to bring something to the ticket that you don't have. You look at Barack Obama and Joe Biden in particular, when you talk about the foreign policy experience or just that experience in Washington, D.C., Joe Biden was able to balance Barack Obama. And so what Kamala Harris and the campaign are trying to do is trying to find someone who can balance her. And that's why you're looking at this Midwest governor who can go out and possibly add a few points around the edges with independents, add a few points around the edges with moderates, et cetera. And so Josh, Governor Walz, who I believe is a far distant third, regardless of what Nancy Pelosi's trying to do, and Mark Kelly, who I believe would be an admirable member of her team, they all fit that extremely well.
So
Election day is 92 days away.
Excuse me. I thought that was interesting what they said. They mentioned Mark Kelly, who was my choice. Again, he's a guy, he was an astronaut. Who doesn't like astronauts? Okay? He would have been my perfect pick because he seems to, everybody seems to love him. He's a senator. He wasn't a governor or anything. His wife had got shot, and everybody loved her. Everybody really loved him. Everybody loved them as a couple. And he's one I thought could appeal to Democrats, Republicans, young, old. He would be, to me, like an uncle. But then Tim Weiss, they consider him like an uncle. He's a coach. Okay, an educator. He and I just told you in one of the last shows, he doesn't read a teleprompter, never read one, so he has to get used to that. But they say he appeals to the Midwestern people. And Josh Shapiro, to me, like I said, he was cool like Obama. He had this charisma. And as I was listening to this and watching this with you guys, if she would have picked him, only reason I didn't want him was because I thought he was just too young. They both were too young-looking couple, meaning president and vice president. I wanted an older statesman kind of person, which I thought would have been Mark Kelly. And the way that you hear Tim and certain politicians, they don't have to cuss now. I mean, a lot of them are cussing now. Okay, you got kids in the audience. That people or families are bringing their kids, and you're cussing for people to vote for you or talking about your opponent. Stop the cussing. Have respect. You can't say you're a family man when you're busy cussing in front of millions of people. Come on. So that's my complaint. But it was interesting because as I'm watching this, they compared Bill Clinton and Al Gore. You know anything about them? They almost looked the same. They were almost the same build. They looked like two guys that, may have worked in the same company, which they did. And their ages were pretty much the same. So it worked for them. But the interesting thing is with Kamala and Tim, Kamala's 61, Tim is 60. Some say he looks way older, but they're in the same age bracket. So where you look at Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, I want to say J.D. Vance is like 38 and Donald Trump is 78. So there's a 40-year difference. There's like a J.D. Vance in between years, and then Donald Trump. Okay. Politics, this is so crazy. So what do you think about the poll? That was taken, I showed that clip because I wanted you guys to see how the media is. That sound like Donald Trump, and it sound like J.D. Vance. When they try to predict things, or even in life, sometimes you get to a point and you're like, wow, where was that main point that got me to this point? So not too long ago, Kamala didn't have a VP pick. They were saying this is who she should go with. And I think Tim was the dark horse and maybe surprised everybody. So, and they've all been taking flag. JD is taking flag for his cat lady stuff and how he feels about families, even though he's got a family, and how he feels about adults without families. He's taking flag with that. Tim has taken flag for some of the things that he said or some of the things he hasn't said. He has to clear up that military thing big time. He has to correct that. If he wants to get the military vote, he has to correct that and say why he left. Because his squadron felt that he deserted them. Because if you have the, and it's a good thing that Republican convention's gone. Because if Walz had been Kamala's VP, then Donald Trump and them would have had people from Tim Squadron in the Republican convention speaking. Politics is dirty. But we need to know the policies of politics. That's what we need to know. So, Kamala, here we go. Homework for you. Get your website in order. Put your policies up there. Geez, it's not that hard. Tim, be honest. Maybe do a Q&A. Maybe you do a Q&A because you like unscripted. And let people know about your military thing. Because if you have to keep explaining it, it's going to hurt you in the long run. JD Vance, stop talking bad about the media before you even get more involved with the media. Stop putting us down, okay? Worry about yourself. You do the press conferences. Don't talk about what they're not doing. Talk about what you want to do. Donald Trump, same thing. Stop talking about people. Talk about the policies. I know it seems like you've learned a little bit. You don't talk as much, but you still talk. Okay? Give you credit for going to the National Association of Black Journalists because you stood up and you you took flack for that, but you stood your ground. I give you credit for that. You went to the Libertarian. You were one of the speakers at the Libertarians, and they don't even like you. And you have to see that show because that was interesting. You talk about people booing. I may air that one. Okay. This is good times and scary times. On my phone, I get things from people, like I said, who talk about Kamala. Some don't like her. Some do like her. Trump, some like him, some don't. Tim, some like him, some don't. JD Vance, some like him, some don't. I tell people, wait until election time. Okay. So you can look at both terms. You saw Donald Trump's first term. He's trying to get a second term. You're seeing Kamala's first term with Joe. She's trying to get a term of her own. And again, I say, think of your stomach. Okay? Let this election roll on your stomach. For the people who got a lot of money, it doesn't matter. But for the people who don't have a lot of money, milk has gone up, bread has gone up, gas has gone up, rent has gone up, school's gone up, but our wages have not gone up. The only time our wages go up is when we work not one job, but two jobs. So this is going to be interesting. Project 2025, again, another one. Democrats talk about that, how scary it is. I've looked at it. It is scary. Donald Trump says he has nothing to do with that. But again, I said he has had people in his regime who are involved with that. And what if Donald Trump is lying and he gets in office and he implements this? Government takeovers. Certain agencies will be gone. That's what's in Project 2025. He says he doesn't know anything about it. Democrats, you need to push that more if he does. And I don't know if they asked Donald Trump about that in his press conference. I'll have to find out. But the biggest thing of this election, too, is Project 2025. Is it a conspiracy? Again, there are no conspiracies with some conspiracies. Okay? Something to think about. So we thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the show. Let me know. 216-702-3718, 216-702-3718. Drop me a line, voicemail. ParkerMan2011 at gmail.com, ParkerMan2011 at gmail.com. Don't forget to go to my Patreon page. Don't forget to hit the like, the share, and the subscribe button. I know you guys are leaving comments and everything and doing the thumbs up, but also subscribe. And I'm doing this like Bob Dole. If you remember, he ran for president. And this was Richard Nixon. And this was Bill Clinton with the saxophone. Donald Trump, I don't know what it is. And Joe Biden, I don't know what it is either. But subscribe. Help us grow. Okay? We try to do things in a Parker twist. And we thank you for supporting us Don't forget, you can always see our shorts, meaning our 5-second videos and everything else. And even if you don't see me in the videos, if you know me, I have the crawl right there with the names, information. But every video I put out there, even if I'm not in there, it's a representation of who I am. If I show you a short clip, that clip has not been edited crazy or anything. It's just a synopsis of what they're trying to say, or I'll make you think on something. Okay? And some will make you laugh. So tell your friends. Again, we're doing this every night at this time, midnight at the Oasis. Make sure you subscribe. And in closing, keep your head up, never look down, always believe in yourself, and therein will lie your answer. We don't just keep it simple. Trying to make sure I can end this right here. We don't just keep it real. Whoops. There we go. I'm also controlling my board. We don't keep it simple. We don't keep it real. We keep it honest. I'm Anthony Parker Alexander. Have a good night. Have a blessed night. And have a blessed morning. God bless you.